They bet on how long she'd last. 2 nights, maybe 3. When the Silver Pine pack threw Lyra Ashford out into the blizzard, they didn't just expect her to leave. They expected her to die. She was the Omega, the mistake, the girl who owned nothing but the rags on her back and the scars on her hands from years of scrubbing their floors. They gave her a frozen, roofless ruin at the edge of the territory and laughed as she walked away into the white void of winter. But they forgot one thing. Wolves are made in the winter, and this one? She was about to build an empire from ashes. The silence in the great hall of Silverpine wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, thick, suffocating, like the air before a lightning strike that splits the sky in half. Outside, the Wyoming winter was howling. The wind screamed against the heavy oak doors, rattling the iron hinges, trying to claw its way into the warmth. Snow fell in sheets so dense the world beyond the windows had disappeared entirely, swallowed by white. But inside the great hall, the cold had nothing to do with temperature. Lyra Ashford stood in the center of the room, her head bowed low. She was 22, but malnutrition and years of sleeping in the drafty servants' quarters made her look younger, smaller, breakable. She wore a faded gray hoodie that had belonged to someone else 3 years ago. The cuffs were frayed, unraveling thread by thread. Her jeans were patched at the knees with fabric that didn't match. Her sneakers had holes in the soles, and her feet were always cold. Always. Her hands were trembling, not just from the cold seeping through the floorboards, but from the sheer terror radiating from the man standing above her. Marcus Cross paced back and forth like a caged predator. He was a massive man, built like a tank, with a buzz cut and eyes that held zero sympathy, zero warmth. He was the beta of Silverpine, second only to the Alpha King himself. And right now, with Cade Thornwood away on pack business in Chicago, Marcus was the law. He stopped directly in front of Lyra. His shadow swallowed her whole. "Do you know how much that meat cost?" His voice was a low growl that vibrated in Lyra's chest, made her ribs ache. That was venison, a 5-grade, imported from New Zealand for the Alpha's return feast. And you clumsy, useless waste of space, you burned it. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, wanted to explain, but the words stuck like glass shards. "I didn't," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire in the hearth. "The stove, the pilot light malfunctioned. I tried to tell the kitchen staff." "Lies!" Marcus's roar echoed off the high rafters, bounced off the stone walls, shook the chandelier overhead. A few pack members lounging by the fire snickered. They loved this, the spectacle, the show. "Always excuses with you, Lyra." Marcus leaned down, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled like whiskey and contempt. "You're an Omega. Your only job is to stay out of the way and do what you're told. And you can't even do that." Lyra bit her lip until she tasted iron. Blood. The metallic tang filled her mouth, grounded her in the moment, even as her mind screamed at her to run. It hadn't been an accident. She had seen Seraphina Vale, one of the high-ranking Gamma females, turn the gas dial up when Lyra stepped into the pantry. Seraphina had smiled while doing it, a slow, deliberate smile. She wanted to see Lyra punished, not for any reason, just because she was bored, just because she could. But in the hierarchy of Silverpine, the word of an Omega was worth less than the dirt under their boots. Lyra's voice died in her throat. She didn't bother defending herself. What was the point? Marcus straightened, rolling his shoulders like a boxer preparing for a fight. "Cade will be home in 2 days," he said, using the Alpha's first name to emphasize his own authority. "I will not have his house smelling of burnt failure when he returns." He paused. Let the silence stretch. Let the tension build. I've made a decision." Lyra looked up. Panic flared in her chest, hot and sharp. "Please, Beta Marcus," she stammered, her hands clutching the hem of her hoodie. "I can scrub the floors. I can take double shifts in the laundry. I'll fix it. You can't fix what you are." The words landed like a physical blow. Lyra flinched. Marcus pointed toward the heavy oak doors. Snow hissed against the windows like static. "You're done here, Lyra.
I'm stripping you of your room in the main house." The murmurs in the room stopped. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. To be kicked out of the pack house in the middle of January was a death sentence. Everyone knew it. "Where?" Lyra's voice cracked. Tears finally spilled over, hot against her frozen cheeks. "Where am I supposed to go?" Marcus smirked. It was a cruel twisting of his lips, devoid of anything human. "There's the old trapper's hut on the northern perimeter," he said slowly, savoring every word. "It's still on pack land, so technically we aren't violating the code by banishing you completely." He paused. "But you are not welcome here anymore. You want to eat? You forage. You want warmth? Make a fire." Someone whispered from the back of the hall. "The trapper's hut hasn't had a roof since the storm of '98. It's a grave." Marcus ignored them. "Go," he barked, "before I have the enforcers drag you out." Lyra didn't pack a bag. She had nothing to pack. She walked out of the heavy oak doors and into the biting wind. The snow was falling horizontally, stinging her face like tiny needles. The cold hit her like a fist to the chest, knocked the air from her lungs. Behind her, the pack house glowed warmly. Through the windows, she could see them, her family, her pack, laughing, returning to their drinks, their conversations, their comfortable lives. The drama of her existence already forgotten. The walk to the northern perimeter took 3 hours. By the time Lyra reached the edge of the woods, her feet were numb blocks of ice inside her worn-out sneakers. The wind cut through her thin hoodie as if she were naked. Her fingers were white, bloodless. She couldn't feel them anymore. She kept moving only because the wolf spirit deep inside her, weak and dormant as it was, pushed her forward. Move or die. Move or die. The words became a mantra, a rhythm in her head that matched the crunch of snow under her feet. She crested the hill and saw it. Marcus hadn't lied. It was a ruin. The old trapper's hut was a rotting carcass of wood and stone. 2 walls were partially collapsed. The roof was a gaping mouth open to the sky. Snow had piled up inside, waist-deep in the corners. Wind howled through the structure like a wounded animal. It wasn't a shelter. It was a wind tunnel, a frozen tomb. Lyra fell to her knees in the snow. Her body was shaking so violently her teeth chattered together, a rapid clicking sound that echoed in her skull. This was it. This was how she ended. Not in a glorious battle, not surrounded by loved ones, but freezing to death in a pile of rotting wood because a gamma female thought it would be funny to ruin a roast. She crawled inside the structure, seeking the corner where the walls were still highest. She curled into a ball, trying to preserve whatever body heat she had left. Her vision began to blur, the edges turning gray, then black. A memory surfaced. Her father's voice, strong, steady. "And Omega's strength isn't in the bite, Lyra. It's in the will to survive the winter. We endure. We outlast. That's our gift." Her father was dead now, had been for 5 years, killed in a border skirmish with a rival pack. Her mother had died beside him, protecting their only child. Lyra had been 17, alone. The pack had kept her out of pity, or maybe guilt. It didn't matter which. She closed her eyes, let the cold wrap around her like a blanket, let the darkness creep closer. And then she heard it. Drip, drip, drip. It was faint, almost imperceptible beneath the roar of the wind. But it was there. Water. In this temperature, 10 degrees below zero, water didn't drip. It froze instantly, turned to ice, became part of the landscape. Lyra forced her eyes open. The world swam in and out of focus. She dragged her numb body across the frozen dirt floor toward the sound. Every movement was agony. Her muscles screamed, her bones ached. She pushed aside a rotted wooden plank, a pile of wet leaves, and there, coming from a crack in the stone foundation, was a tiny wisp of steam. Lyra blinked. She was hallucinating. She had to be. There was no other explanation. But when she reached out a shaking hand and touched the stone near the crack, it was warm. The warmth against her fingertips was shocking, electric, like touching a live wire. She scrambled closer, survival instincts overriding the hypothermia that was trying to shut her organs down. She dug frantically at the debris, her fingernails breaking against the frozen earth and stone. Blood welled up from her cuticles, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. The hut was built against the side of a rocky incline, and as she cleared away the rotting timber and years of accumulated mulch, she found the source. An old iron pipe, rusted, ancient, protruding from the rock face. A steady trickle of water was leaking from a fissure in the metal. And it wasn't just warm, it was hot. Lyra realized what this was. The Silver Pine territory was known for its geothermal activity. Hot springs were scattered deep in the mountains, hidden in caves and valleys where humans never ventured. This pipe must have been part of an old system. A trapper, maybe 100 years ago, had tapped into a geothermal vent to heat the floors. A forgotten system, buried and abandoned when the hut fell into disrepair. She pressed her frozen cheek against the warm stone surrounding the pipe. The heat radiated through her skin. It was painful at first, a burning sensation as the blood rushed back into her capillaries. Then it was blissful, a relief so profound she almost sobbed. She wasn't going to freeze. Not tonight. "Okay," Lyra whispered to the empty room, her voice raspy and weak. "Okay, I can work with this." The despair that had crushed her in the great hall evaporated. In its place, a white-hot determination burned. They wanted her to die. She would spite them by living. The first night was brutal. But she survived it by curling around the warm pipe, covering herself with the driest debris she could find. When dawn broke, the storm had passed. The world was brilliant, blindingly white. The sun reflected off the snow in a way that hurt her eyes, but it was beautiful, painful and beautiful. Lyra didn't rest. She knew Marcus would expect her to be dead by now. Maybe Cade would return, ask about her, and Marcus would shake his head sadly. The Omega couldn't handle it. She wandered off, probably died in the storm. And Cade, busy with pack politics and territory negotiations, wouldn't press further. She couldn't go back and beg. Marcus would just finish what the cold started. She had to make this place habitable, prove she could survive on her own. She spent the morning scavenging. The ruin wasn't as hopeless as it looked. The stone foundation was solid. The wood that had collapsed was rot-resistant cedar. It looked ugly, splintered and gray, but it was strong. She needed tools. She remembered an old maintenance shed about a mile back toward the main house, a place where the groundskeepers dumped broken equipment, things they didn't want to bother repairing. Lyra trudged through the snow, keeping to the tree line to avoid being seen by border patrols. Her feet were still numb. Every step sent jolts of pain up her legs, but she didn't stop. She struck gold. In the rusted dumpster behind the shed, she found a shovel with a cracked handle, a tarp with a few holes, and a discarded toolbox containing a rusty hammer, some nails, and a heavy-duty staple gun. To the pack, this was trash. To Lyra, it was a treasury. She dragged her loot back to the hut. The journey took twice as long on the return trip, her arms burning from the weight. But when she finally dropped the tools onto the dirt floor of the hut, triumph surged through her chest. She went to work. For the next 7 days, Lyra worked until her hands bled. She was an Omega. She lacked the raw physical power of an Alpha, or the aggression of a Gamma. But she possessed something they didn't: endurance. Omegas were built to carry burdens, to outlast, to survive. She started with the roof. She couldn't rebuild the timber frame alone. She wasn't strong enough. So she improvised. She used the scavenged tarp, doubling it over and nailing it across the most exposed corner of the hut. She reinforced it with pine boughs, weaving them together tight enough to catch the snow. The snow would then act as insulation, creating a thick blanket that held in the heat from the geothermal pipe. Inside her little tent, the warmth was trapped. By the second night, the temperature inside her enclosure was hovering around 60 degrees. Outside, it was 10 below zero. But Lyra didn't stop at survival. She wanted dignity. She spent hours scrubbing the stone floor with snow and coarse sand until the grime of decades was gone. The floor gleamed, dark and clean. She wove a sleeping mat out of dried cattails and pine needles. It was a trick she had read about in an old survival book in the Pack library years ago when she was still allowed to wander the house freely. The mat was soft, fragrant, and elevated her off the cold ground. On the 4th day, she made her biggest discovery. While clearing out the back of the chimney, a stone structure that was still mostly intact, she found a loose stone. Behind it was a small metal box, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Lyra's heart pounded as she pried it open. Inside were matches, a hunting knife with a leather-wrapped handle, and a stash of dried herbs, sage, lavender, chamomile, left by whoever had lived here 50 years ago. But there was something else. A diary, leather-bound, the pages yellowed and brittle. Lyra opened it carefully. The handwriting was old-fashioned, looping, and elegant. The first entry was dated March 14, 1974. My name is Jonathan Thornwood. I am 73 years old, and I have been exiled. Lyra's breath caught. Thornwood. Cade's last name. She read on, her fingers trembling. I loved an Omega. Her name was Eliza. She was kind, intelligent, and beautiful. But the Pack said it was beneath an Alpha to mate with an Omega. They said it would weaken our bloodline. I refused to give her up. For that crime, I was stripped of my title and exiled to this hut. Eliza followed me willingly. We lived here for 3 years. We were happy. But then Marcus Cross's grandfather, Beta at the time, accused me of conspiracy. Said I was planning to overthrow the Alpha. It was a lie. But the Pack believed him. They came for us in the night. Eliza fought them. They killed her. I was allowed to live, but only in exile. A warning to others who might defy the hierarchy.
Marcus Cross Sr. betrayed me. He wanted power, and he knew the easiest way to get it was to eliminate threats like me. If you are reading this, stranger, know this. The Cross bloodline will not stop. They are patient. They plan across generations. If my grandson ever becomes Alpha, warn him. Marcus Cross's descendants will try again. The entry ended there. Lyra stared at the page, her mind racing. Cade's grandfather had been exiled for loving an Omega, just like her. And Marcus Cross's family had orchestrated it. History was repeating itself. She closed the diary carefully and tucked it into her makeshift bag, a piece of canvas she had fashioned into a satchel. She would keep this, show it to Cade when, if, he ever came looking for her. But for now, she had work to do. By the end of the week, the ruin had transformed. From the outside, it still looked like a pile of debris, a perfect camouflage. No one passing by would think twice about it. But inside the tarped section, it was a sanctuary. The air smelled of pine resin and the lavender she had hung to dry near the hot pipe. The constant, gentle heat from the geothermal vent kept the space warm, cozy. She had fashioned a small basin from a hollowed-out stone to catch the hot water, giving her a place to wash. Steaming water. A luxury even the lower-ranking wolves in the pack house didn't have, as the boilers often ran out of hot water by the time the Omegas were allowed to shower. She sat on her pine needle mat, sipping a cup of hot water infused with pine needles. The tea tasted earthy, slightly bitter, but it was warm and rich in vitamin C. It would keep scurvy at bay, keep her immune system strong. She looked around her small, warm kingdom. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even a proper house. But for the first time in her life, it was hers. No one was screaming at her. No one was hitting her. No one was telling her she was worthless. She was safe. And more than that, she was free. But safety in the werewolf world is an illusion. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the temperature plummeted, the wind changed direction. It carried sound from the valley below. Lyra's ears perked up. She heard the roar of engines, SUVs moving up the main road toward the pack house. Alpha Cade was back. She felt a strange pang in her chest. Curiosity? Hope? She wasn't sure. Down in the valley, in the opulent office of the Alpha King, Cade Thornwood threw his coat onto the leather couch. He was 6'3" with dark hair that was slightly too long, brushing his collar. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of silver. He was exhausted. The negotiations in Chicago had been a nightmare. Territory disputes with the Crimson Pack were draining their finances. He had spent a week sleeping in stiff hotel beds, arguing with lawyers and rival alphas. All he wanted was a hot shower and silence. He rubbed his temples and looked at Marcus, who stood at attention by the desk. "Status report," Cade said, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. "Anything break while I was gone?" Marcus hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but Cade noticed. He had an instinct for lies. It was what made him a good leader. "Quiet week, Alpha," Marcus said smoothly. "Routine patrols, no border breaches." Cade narrowed his eyes. "Everything? The house feels quiet." "Just housekeeping," Marcus said. "We had to let go of one of the Omegas, Lyra. She was caught stealing from the pantry and destroyed the winter meat supply. I exiled her to the perimeter." Cade paused, mid-motion, his hand freezing on the bottle of whiskey he had been reaching for. "Lyra," he repeated slowly. He pictured the girl, small, quiet,
always scurrying around the edges of rooms like a ghost. He didn't know her well, but stealing, sabotage, it didn't fit the scent of fear she always carried. "Exiled?" Cade asked, a frown creasing his forehead. "In this weather? Where did she go?" "She left the territory," Marcus lied effortlessly. "Probably headed south to the city. She's fine, Cade. She's a stray. They always land on their feet." Cade felt a prick of unease, a wolf's instinct that something was wrong. But he was too tired to chase it. He had a pack to run, financial crises to solve, border disputes to manage. "Fine," Cade sighed, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass. "I'm going for a run. I need to clear my head." "In this storm?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the window where snow had started falling again. "The forecast says the temperature is dropping to 20 below tonight." "I'm an alpha, Marcus," Cade said, his eyes flashing gold for just a moment. "A little cold won't kill me." He stripped off his shirt, walked out the patio doors, and shifted mid-stride. A massive black wolf exploded into the snow, shaking snowflakes from its thick fur before taking off into the tree line. Marcus watched him go, a slow smile spreading across his face. Everything was going according to plan. Cade ran hard. He let the burn in his muscles distract him from the stress of leadership. He ran until his lungs ached, pushing further north than he usually went, toward the jagged cliffs of the perimeter. The blizzard hit faster than the weathermen had predicted. Within minutes, the world turned into a white void. Visibility dropped to 0. The wind was so loud it drowned out his own thoughts. Disoriented by the sudden whiteout, Cade slipped on a patch of ice hidden beneath fresh snow. He tumbled down a ravine, his massive body slamming into rocks and frozen earth. His shoulder hit a granite outcrop with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through his vision, white-hot and blinding. He tried to stand, but his left front leg gave out, dislocated, maybe broken. He was miles from the pack house, buried in a ravine, in a whiteout storm, with a crippled leg. Even for an alpha, this was bad. He howled for help, but the wind tore the sound away before it could reach the sentries. The cold began to creep into his bones, slowing his heart. His healing factor, usually rapid, was slowing down because of the extreme hypothermia setting in. He dragged himself forward, looking for any kind of shelter. A rock overhang, a cave, anything. And then, through the howling wind, he smelled it. Lavender, pine, and heat. It was faint, almost impossible, but it was there. His wolf latched onto the scent like a lifeline. He dragged his broken body toward it, inch by agonizing inch. He crested a small rise and saw it, a ruin of a shack, half buried in snow. It looked like a tomb, but the scent was coming from there. He collapsed against the rotting wood of what might have once been a door. His vision was fading to black. He gave one last weak whimper before the darkness took him. Inside the hut, Lyra froze. She set down her cup of tea, her body going rigid. She heard it. Not the wind. A whimper. She grabbed the hunting knife from Jonathan's cache and moved to the heavy wooden pallet she used as a door. She cracked it open an inch, peering into the storm. A massive black wolf lay slumped against her wall, rapidly being covered by snow. Lyra gasped. She knew that wolf. She knew the silver streak in the fur along the spine. It was the Alpha. Cade Thornwood was dying on her doorstep. What happened next blurred into survival instinct. Lyra dragged the massive wolf inside, watched him shift back to human form, broken and hypothermic. She reset his dislocated shoulder, heard him scream, treated his injuries with everything she'd learned from old books and desperation. They shared a storm-bound night, talked, connected. When dawn broke and he had to leave, he touched her face with impossible gentleness. "I'll come back," he promised. And he left his Rolex, collateral, proof, a vow written in platinum.
2 days after she saved the dying Alpha's life, after she watched him disappear into the dawn with a promise to return, Lyra stood at the threshold of her sanctuary. His Rolex was heavy in her palm. His Rolex heavy in her palm. Lyra stood at the threshold of her sanctuary. The watch wasn't forgotten. It was collateral. A promise written in platinum and sapphire crystal. He would return. But first, he had a pack to save. And she had work to do. For the next 5 days, both of them played dangerous games in very different arenas. Cade returned to the pack house at dawn. He shifted back to human form in the woods, pulling on the spare clothes he kept in the tactical backpack. His shoulder still ached, a dull, persistent throb, but it was functional. Lyra's yarrow poultice had worked miracles. He walked through the main entrance like nothing had happened, like he hadn't spent the night in a sanctuary built by the Omega his Beta had tried to murder. Marcus was waiting in the foyer. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Long run," Marcus observed. "Needed to think," Cade said. He kept his voice neutral, bored. "The Crimson Pact negotiations are giving me a headache." Marcus watched him climb the stairs. Cade could feel those eyes on his back. Measuring. Suspicious. Good. Let him wonder. For the next 5 days, Cade wore a mask. He attended council meetings. He reviewed financial reports, the clean ones Marcus provided, not the real ones hidden in the safe. He smiled at visiting dignitaries. He played the role of Alpha King perfectly. But at night, he hunted. The first breakthrough came on day 2. Cade waited until 3 in the morning. The pack house was silent, except for the occasional creak of settling timber and the whisper of wind against windows. He moved through the shadows like a ghost. Years of practice made him nearly invisible even in human form. He reached Marcus's office without encountering a single sentry. The door was locked. Cade pulled a tension wrench and pick from his pocket, tools he'd learned to use long before he became Alpha. His father had taught him, trust but verify, and always have a way in. The lock clicked open. Inside, Marcus's office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Everything was precisely arranged. Desk spotless, books alphabetized. Not a paper out of place. Cade went straight to the painting behind the desk, a landscape of the Wyoming mountains that Marcus claimed was a family heirloom. He lifted it off the wall, revealing the safe beneath. Electronic keypad, 8 digits. Cade pulled out his phone, scrolled to the notes he'd made. Marcus Cross Sr.'s birthday, the grandfather who had betrayed Jonathan Thornwood. He typed, April 17th, 1923. The safe beeped. Green light. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of documents. Cade pulled them out, spreading them across Marcus's pristine desk. Financial records, but not the ones Marcus had been showing the council. These showed the truth. $2.3 million, skimmed over 5 years from casino profits, lumber mill revenues, investment returns. Funneled through shell companies with names like Mountain Ridge Holdings and Silver Pine Investments, LLC. Cade's hands trembled as he photographed each page with his phone. Click, click, click. How long? How many years had Marcus been stealing from the pack
while Cade was distracted by territory disputes and political maneuvering. He found a second ledger. This one tracked payments to individuals. Names he recognized, pack members who had been unusually loyal to Marcus. Bribes, hush money. And at the bottom of the stack, a folder labeled simply Insurance. Cade opened it. Inside were contracts, agreements with the Crimson Pack, signed by Marcus Cross, Beta of Silverpine. The agreements promised territorial concessions, access to Silverpine's northern hunting grounds, a percentage of casino profits. In exchange, the Crimson Pack would support Marcus's challenge for Alpha at the Winter Solstice Ball. Cade's vision blurred red for a moment. His wolf surged, demanding shift, demanding blood. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. He photographed everything, returned the documents to the safe exactly as he'd found them, rehung the painting, locked the door behind him. By the time the sun rose, he was in his own room, downloading the photos to an encrypted drive. He had evidence of embezzlement, evidence of conspiracy. But he needed more. He needed witnesses. That same day, Cade began gathering his own army. He started small, carefully, one conversation at a time in places Marcus wouldn't think to monitor. The first was Finn, a young Delta who worked in the lumber mill. Cade found him during his lunch break, sitting alone near the equipment shed. "Finn," Cade said, sitting down on the bench beside him, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Finn's hands shook. He was 19, skinny, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. "Alpha, I don't know what you mean." "Marcus," Cade said quietly. "Has he ever threatened you?" Finn's face went white. His sandwich fell from his hands onto the dirt. "I can't," his voice cracked. He said he'd kill my sister, Anna. She's only 15. She's still in school. If I talked, he'd make it look like an accident." Cade felt something cold settle in his chest. Not rage, colder than that. Determination. "When?" he asked. 6 months ago, I saw him take money from the mill safe, cash that was supposed to go to the workers' medical fund. He caught me watching, dragged me into the office and... Finn touched his ribs, wincing at the memory. "He beat me, said if I ever told anyone, Anna would disappear." "I will protect your sister," Cade said. The Alpha command bled into his voice. Not a request, a vow. "I will protect you, but I need you to testify at the Solstice Ball, in front of the visiting Alphas." Finn looked at him, really looked at him, searching for truth. "You promise? You swear on the pack bond?" "I swear on my life," Cade said. "Marcus will never touch you or Anna again." Finn nodded, slowly. Okay, I'll do it." The second witness was Rebecca, a Delta female who worked in the accounting office. She was harder to approach. Marcus had her working late most nights, isolated from the rest of the pack. Cade waited until she left the office at midnight, intercepted her in the parking lot. "Rebecca, I need 5 minutes." She jumped, spinning around. Her hand went to the pepper spray on her keychain. Then she recognized him. "Alpha? What are you doing out here?" "Asking for your help," Cade said. "You've been cooking Marcus's books for 2 years. I know you didn't have a choice. I know what he threatened." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears immediately. She didn't even try to deny it. "He made me watch," she whispered. "When he beat Daniel. Daniel was my friend. We went to school together. He questioned one of Marcus's invoices.
Said the numbers didn't match. Marcus dragged him to the warehouse and beat him unconscious. Made me watch the whole thing. Said that's what happens to people who ask questions. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped her keys. Cade picked them up, handed them back gently. "Where's Daniel now?" Cade asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Gone. Left the territory 3 days later. Wouldn't even say goodbye, just vanished." "I'm going to stop him," Cade said. "Marcus, I'm going to expose everything at the ball. But I need people willing to speak the truth. I need you." Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "If I testify, he'll kill me." "Not if I kill him first." The words hung in the cold night air, a promise, a threat. Rebecca looked up at him, at the Alpha who had been too blind to see what was happening in his own pack, and she made a choice. "Okay," she said. "I'll testify. But you have to promise me, Daniel gets to come home. Safe. No retaliation." "I promise," Cade said. "I'll send sentries to find him. Bring him home under my personal protection." By the end of day 3, Cade had 6 witnesses. 6 wolves who had been terrorized into silence by a beta drunk on power and generational vengeance. He gathered them in the library at midnight, a room Marcus never entered. Too many books, not enough weapons. They sat in a circle. Finn, Rebecca, 4 others, all young, all terrified. "I know what I'm asking," Cade said. "I know the risk. But if we don't stop him now, he'll destroy this pack from the inside. He's planning to challenge me at the ball. And if he wins, every one of you becomes a loose end." He looked each of them in the eye. "I need you to be brave for one more night. Just one. Stand with me. Tell the truth in front of the visiting alphas. And I swear on my father's grave, Marcus Cross will never hurt anyone in this pack again." They nodded, one by one, scared but determined. Cade's army was small, but it was enough. While Cade built his case in the valley, Lyra fortified her kingdom in the north. The morning after Cade left, she stood in the ruins of her sanctuary and assessed the situation with cold logic. Marcus knew she was alive. He would tell Cade she'd left for the city, but he would also wonder. Marcus was paranoid, thorough. Eventually, he might send someone to verify her death. She needed to be ready. Lyra spent the first day expanding her perimeter defenses. She dug a second pit trap on the eastern approach, this one deeper than the first. She covered it with branches and snow, made it invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. At the bottom, she drove sharpened stakes into the frozen earth, angled up, lethal. Then she created an escape route. There was a narrow ravine about 50 yards behind the sanctuary. Most wolves wouldn't even notice it, just a crack in the rocks, barely 2 feet wide. But Lyra was small, omega-sized. She could fit. She spent hours clearing debris from the ravine, creating a path that led deep into the forest. A hidden exit. Insurance. Next came weapons. She couldn't rely on the Glock alone. She didn't have unlimited ammunition, and if multiple attackers came, she needed options. She made spears from fallen branches, sharpened the points with Jonathan's hunting knife until they could pierce leather, hardened the tips in the geothermal vent's heat. She collected rocks, fist-sized, heavy, good for throwing. She practiced her aim against a tree trunk until she could hit a target at 20 yards. And she made bombs. Not explosives, chemical weapons. She boiled water with cayenne pepper until the steam made her eyes water even from 10 feet away. She poured the liquid into old mason jars she'd found in the ruins, sealed them tight. If anyone came close, she'd throw them. The glass would shatter. The pepper solution would blind. By the end of day 2, her sanctuary was a fortress.
small, hidden, but deadly to anyone who underestimated the Omega inside. On day 3, Lyra expanded her survival infrastructure. She built a smokehouse from stacked stones and scavenged metal sheets, fed it with green wood that produced thick, preserving smoke. She hung the rabbits she'd caught in her snares, letting them cure. Preserved meat meant she could survive for weeks if needed. She created a water filtration system, layered charcoal from her fires, sand from the riverbed, and gravel in a hollowed log. Poured water through and watched it come out clear, clean, safe. She wove a waterproof bag from cattails. Took her hours to get the weaving tight enough, but when she submerged it in the hot spring, not a drop leaked through. She could carry supplies now, travel if necessary, and she mapped her territory. Every day she walked a different direction: north, south, east, west. She memorized every landmark within a 2-mile radius, marked every edible plant, winter berries, pine nuts, roots that didn't freeze, noted every potential shelter, caves, overhangs, hollow trees. She found animal trails, deer, elk, and wolves. On day 4, she found tracks that made her blood run cold. Wolf prints, large, but not Cade's. She knew his tracks now, the distinctive pattern of his gait, the size of his paws. These were different, smaller, 2 sets moving together. Someone was watching her sanctuary. Lyra knelt in the snow, studying the prints. They circled her perimeter, but didn't approach, like they were scouting, gathering information. She looked up at the tree line, felt eyes on her skin. They were still out there, waiting. Lyra returned to her sanctuary and added more traps, more weapons, more escape routes. If they came for her, she would be ready. Every night, Cade came to her. He never stayed long, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. The risk of being followed was too high, but those stolen moments in the sanctuary became the only thing keeping both of them sane. On night 2, Cade arrived carrying a medical kit, professional grade, the kind pack doctors used. "Your hands," he said, kneeling beside her near the geothermal pipe. Lyra held them out. They were rough, scarred, the nails broken and bleeding from digging traps and weaving cattails. Cade cleaned each wound with antiseptic. His touch was gentle, careful. He wrapped her hands in gauze with practiced efficiency. "You've done this before," Lyra observed. "Field medicine. Every alpha learns it." He secured the bandage with medical tape, in case the pack doctor isn't available during a fight. When he finished, Lyra didn't pull her hands away. Neither did Cade. They sat there, her bandaged hands in his, the geothermal pipe hissing softly beside them. "I found Jonathan's diary," Lyra said quietly. She reached for the leather-bound book, opened it to a passage she'd marked. "Listen to this." She read aloud, her voice soft in the warm space. March 28, 1974. "Eliza asked me today if I regret choosing her over the pack. I told her the truth. The pack was my duty. She is my heart. And a man who chooses duty over heart is not a man at all. He is a machine, and machines do not live. They simply function until they break." Cade's throat tightened. "My grandfather died thinking I'd never know the truth, that his story died with him." "But it didn't," Lyra said. She closed the diary, held it against her chest. "He left this, left evidence, left a warning. He was protecting you 50 years before you were born." Cade looked at her. At this woman who had survived everything Marcus threw at her, and somehow still found beauty in an old man's love story. "I don't know who to trust anymore," he admitted.
The words came out raw, vulnerable. "I've known Marcus since high school. We played football together. He stood beside me at my father's funeral. How could I have been so blind?" Lyra set the diary down and took his hand. Her touch was warm, despite the bandages. "You weren't blind," she said. "You were trusting. There's a difference. Trust is a strength, not a weakness. Marcus weaponized it. That's on him, not you." She squeezed his hand. "Trust yourself now, Cade. You're not your father. You won't ignore the signs. You're already fixing what he broke." Cade stared at their joined hands. At the contrast, his large and calloused from combat training, hers small and scarred from survival. "When I'm here," he said quietly, "I can breathe. The pack house suffocates me. Everyone watching, everyone lying. But you—" He looked up, met her eyes. "You make me remember why I wanted to be Alpha. Not for power, for this, to protect people who need it." Lyra felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the geothermal pipe. She almost said it, almost whispered, "I think I'm falling for you." But then the alarm chimes jingled, faint, distant, a patrol passing nearby. They both froze, listening. The footsteps moved on, faded into silence. The moment had passed. Cade stood, checked his watch. "I need to go. Council meeting in 6 hours." Lyra walked him to the door. He paused at the threshold, turned back. "2 more days," he said. "The ball is in 2 days. After that, this is over. One way or another." "I know," Lyra said. He left, disappeared into the darkness. Lyra returned to the geothermal pipe, wrapped her arms around her knees, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Fear, hope, and something that terrified her more than Marcus ever could. Love. On night 4, Cade taught her to shoot. He'd brought the Glock on night 3, a compact 9mm, 17 rounds in the magazine. "Have you ever fired a gun?" he asked. "My father taught me," Lyra said, "before he died. We used to practice in the woods. He said an Omega couldn't rely on strength, so I had to be smarter, faster, better prepared." "Show me." Lyra took the gun, checked the chamber out of habit, cleared it, handed it back. "Safety," she said, pointing to the small lever. "Magazine release. Slide lock." Cade smiled, actually smiled. "Your father taught you well." He loaded a magazine, handed the weapon back. But knowing the mechanics and hitting a target under pressure are different things. They went outside, found a tree about 15 yards away. Cade used his knife to carve an X into the bark. "Stance," he said, positioning himself behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, adjusting her posture. Feet shoulder-width apart, dominant foot slightly back, both hands on the grip. Lyra's breath caught as his chest pressed against her back, his warmth soaking through her flannel shirt. "Breathe," he murmured. His voice was low, rough. "Slow breath in. Exhale halfway. Hold it. Squeeze the trigger on the exhale. Don't pull. Squeeze." Lyra aimed at the X, breathed in, exhaled halfway, squeezed. The gun kicked. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder. The bullet hit 2 inches left of the X. "Again," Cade said. His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Adjust for the kick. Compensate right." She fired again. Closer. 1 inch left. Again. Bang. Dead center. "Good," Cade said, but he didn't move, didn't step away. Lyra lowered the gun,
turned in his arms. They were close. Too close. "Where did you really learn?" Cade asked. His eyes searched hers. "I told you. My father." "No," Cade said. "You shoot like someone who's killed before. Someone who knows what it means to pull that trigger for real." Lyra's jaw tightened. A memory surfaced. Sharp. Painful. "The border skirmish," she said quietly. 5 years ago. The one where my parents died. I was there. I was 17. A rogue attacked our camp. My father was down. My mother was protecting me. The rogue was going to kill her." She closed her eyes. "I picked up my father's gun, and I shot him. Center mass, just like Dad taught me. He went down. Didn't get back up." When she opened her eyes, Cade was staring at her with something that looked like awe. "You were 17, he said, "and you killed to protect your family." "I'm an Omega," Lyra said, "not a pacifist." Cade cupped her face with both hands. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "You're not just an Omega," he said. "You're a warrior. You always have been." The space between them was electric, charged. 1 inch, maybe less. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. "Kiss me," she thought. "Please, just—" The alarm chimes rang, louder this time, closer. Cade stepped back immediately. "Patrol, I have to go." He was gone before Lyra could form words. She stood there, gun still in her hand, and screamed her frustration at the empty forest. On night 5, Cade didn't come. Lyra waited. Checked the watch he'd left her. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Nothing. She paced the sanctuary, fed the fire, checked her traps, anything to distract herself from the growing knot of worry in her stomach. What if Marcus had caught him? What if the conspiracy was deeper than they thought? What if Cade was— No, she couldn't think like that. At midnight, she finally heard movement outside, but it wasn't the scratch at the door that signaled Cade's arrival. It was the roar of an engine. Lyra grabbed the Glock and moved to the window slit she'd cut in the tarp, peered out into the darkness. Headlights, cutting through the trees, an SUV, coming straight toward her sanctuary. Her blood ran cold. They'd found her. Miles away, in the pack house, Cade sat trapped in a council meeting that had run 5 hours longer than scheduled. The visiting Alphas had arrived early. Red River Pack, Stone Mountain Pack, Cascade Falls. They wanted to discuss territory boundaries, trade agreements, hunting rights. Cade smiled, nodded, signed documents, all while his wolf clawed at his skin, screaming at him to leave, to run north, to check on her. Something was wrong. He could feel it. A tension in his chest that had nothing to do with politics. The mate bond, still fragile, still forming, but there, and it was screaming danger. "If you'll excuse me," Cade said, standing abruptly, "I need to take this call." He walked out before anyone could protest, pulled out his phone, dialed the Northern Patrol. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Cade's hands shook as he pulled up the security app on his phone. Cameras placed along the northern perimeter. He scrolled through the feeds, and then he saw it. Marcus, in the security room, watching footage from hidden cameras Cade didn't even know existed. Cameras pointed north, cameras that showed a massive black wolf running toward the old trapper's hut, night after night, the same route, the same destination. Marcus had been watching, tracking, waiting. And now— Cade switched to the live feeds, saw an SUV leaving the packhouse garage, saw Marcus in the driver's seat, Serafina in the passenger seat. 2 enforcers in the back, heading north. Cade's vision went red. In the security room, 30 minutes earlier, Marcus had called Serafina to join him. "Look at this," he said, replaying the footage. "Every night, same time, same route." Serafina leaned over his shoulder, watching the black wolf disappear into the forest. "He goes north every night," she said. Her voice was tight with jealousy. "He's visiting the exile." "Not just visiting," Marcus said. He pulled up thermal imaging, a heat signature glowing in the ruins of the old trapper's hut. "She's alive. And she's built something." He zoomed in. The heat signature was too strong for a simple fire, too consistent. "How is she surviving out there?" Serafina asked. "She's not just surviving," Marcus said. His smile was cold, predatory. "She's thriving. That's the problem." He stood up, grabbed his rifle from the wall. "What are you going to do?" Serafina asked. "I'm going to bring Cade a little surprise for the ball," Marcus said. "Get Jax and Miller. Tell them to bring the flare gun and accelerant. We're going to burn the Omega out. And then we're going to parade her in front of 5 visiting alphas tomorrow night. Public humiliation before the challenge." Serafina's eyes gleamed. "Can I come?" "I was counting on it," Marcus said. At the sanctuary, Lyra moved fast. She grabbed her go-bag, the waterproof cattail satchel she'd woven. Inside, Jonathan's diary, the Rolex, dried meat, water filtration supplies, matches. She pulled on her boots, checked the Glock. 17 rounds. She had 2 extra magazines. 51 bullets total. The engine noise was getting closer. Lyra made a decision. She wasn't running. Not yet. She positioned herself behind the reinforced section of the sanctuary, where the stone wall was thickest. Cover. She pulled the pepper bombs from their shelf, set them within arm's reach, loaded the Glock, thumbed off the safety, and waited. The SUV burst into the clearing. Headlights flooded the sanctuary. Marcus stepped out first, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Then Serafina, dressed in designer winter gear that probably cost more than Lyra's entire former life. 2 enforcers, Jax and Miller, both carrying weapons. "Well, well," Marcus called out. His voice carried across the clearing. "The little Omega is still alive. How disappointing." Lyra didn't respond. She stayed hidden, watching. Serafina circled the sanctuary like a predator. "Cade's been visiting you, hasn't he? Does the Alpha King have a little pet?" Lyra's finger tightened on the trigger. Marcus raised his hand, gave a casual wave. "Burn it." Jax pulled the flare gun from his belt, aimed at the tarp roof. Lyra moved. She grabbed one of the pepper bombs, hurled it through the window slit with all her strength. The mason jar arced through the air, spinning, catching the headlights. It hit Jax square in the chest. Glass shattered. Cayenne solution exploded across his face. Jax screamed, clawed at his eyes. The flare gun dropped from his hands, firing wild. The flare shot into the trees, missing the sanctuary entirely. "Bitch!" Serafina shrieked. Lyra was already moving. She kicked open the door, grabbed the second pepper bomb, threw it at Miller. He tried to dodge, failed. The jar caught his shoulder, sprayed across his face and chest. He went down, gagging. Lyra sprinted toward the tree line. She knew these woods. Every rock, every root, every shadow. She could disappear. Miller recovered faster than she expected. He was a Gamma, stronger, faster. He caught up to her in 10 steps, grabbed her arm. Lyra spun, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, heard the air whoosh out of his lungs, but he didn't let go. She stomped on his instep, raked her nails across his face, fought like her father had taught her, dirty, desperate, effective. Miller stumbled. Lyra broke free, ran, straight toward the pit trap she dug on the eastern approach. She knew exactly where it was, counted her steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, jump. She cleared the trap by inches, landed hard on the other side, rolled. Miller wasn't so lucky. He hit the trap at full speed. The branches gave way. He fell 8 feet. Crack! His scream split the night. His leg had snapped against one of the sharpened stakes. Lyra didn't stop. She kept running. But Marcus was faster. He'd been a beta for 10 years, trained in combat, enhanced by wolf genetics even in human form. He blurred forward, supernatural speed. His hand caught the back of her flannel shirt, yanked hard. Lyra went for the Glock, pulled it from her waistband, aimed. Marcus grabbed her wrist, twisted. The gun flew from her grip, disappeared into the snow. Lyra drove her knee toward his groin. Marcus blocked it, caught her other wrist. She bit him, sank her teeth into his forearm, tasted blood. Marcus roared, backhanded her across the face. The world exploded into stars. Lyra hit a tree, hard. Her head cracked against the bark. Blood filled her mouth. Her vision swam. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Marcus grabbed her by the hair, dragged her toward the SUV. "You're coming with us," he snarled.
"Tonight, you're the entertainment." Lyra clawed at his hand, kicked, fought, but her strength was fading. The blow to her head had scrambled her balance. Her vision kept doubling. Through the haze, she saw Seraphina setting charges around the sanctuary, not just burning it, destroying it, erasing every trace she'd ever existed. "No," Lyra whispered. "Please, no." Marcus threw her into the back of the SUV. Jax climbed in beside her, still half blind, his face a mask of rage. The last thing Lyra saw before they slammed the door was her sanctuary exploding. The charges detonated simultaneously. Fire erupted from every window. The tarp roof went up like tinder. The stone walls cracked under the heat. Her kingdom, her hope, her home, turning to ash. 20 miles away, Cade dropped his whiskey glass. It shattered on the marble floor of the council room. Crystal fragments scattered like diamonds. The visiting alphas stopped mid-sentence, stared. Cade's hand was pressed to his chest. His eyes were wide, unseeing. Pain, sharp, bright, lancing through the mate bond like a knife. Lyra. He turned to the window, saw it. A column of black smoke rising from the north. Thick, dark, visible even in the night sky. His eyes bled gold. Not flecks, not partial. Solid, glowing gold that lit up the dim room. "Alpha Thornwood?" One of the visiting alphas stepped forward. "Are you?" Cade didn't answer. He walked out of the room, down the hallway, through the main doors, and then he shifted. Clothes ripped, bones cracked, fur exploded across his skin. The massive black wolf didn't stop, didn't slow. It launched itself into the forest and ran. The alpha was gone. Only the beast remained. And it was hunting. The massive black wolf tore through the forest like a force of nature. Trees blurred past. Snow exploded in his wake. Cade's paws hammered the frozen earth with such force that the ground trembled. His vision had narrowed to a single point, a single purpose. Find mate, save mate, kill everyone in between. The mate bond was new, fragile, still forming,
but it screamed in his chest like a living thing. Lyra's pain echoed through him, sharp and bright and terrifying. He followed the scent trail. Her fear was a tangible thing in the air, mixed with smoke, blood, and Marcus's sour, rotten stench. The SUV tracks were fresh, deep grooves in the snow leading south, back toward the pack house. Cade pushed harder. His wolf demanded speed, demanded blood. But the human part of his mind, the Alpha King who had survived pack politics for 10 years, forced him to slow down, to think. If he attacked now, covered in mud and rage, Marcus would spin it, make Cade look unstable, unfit to lead. He needed to be smart, needed to play this right, but every instinct screamed at him to tear Marcus's throat out. The basement of the Silver Pine pack house was a place of shadows and old stone. It had been used for storage for decades. Wine racks, archived records, forgotten furniture covered in dust. But in the far corner, behind a false wall that only the Beta knew about, was a room, a holding cell. Lyra woke to the smell of mildew and her own blood. Her head throbbed, her vision swam. She tried to move and realized her wrists were chained above her head, locked to an iron ring bolted into the stone wall. Her feet barely touched the ground. All her weight hung from her shoulders. The pain was immediate and excruciating. "Good. You're awake." Serafina stepped out of the shadows. She looked immaculate. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than Lyra had ever owned in her entire life. "The solstice ball starts in 6 hours," Serafina said, circling Lyra like a predator circling prey. "Marcus wants you presentable." "Well, as presentable as trash can be." She grabbed Lyra's chin, forced her to make eye contact. "How does it feel?" Serafina hissed. "Knowing that Cade only visited you out of pity, that you'll always be nothing but the Omega who got lucky for a week." Lyra said nothing. She met Serafina's gaze with steady hazel eyes. And that silence, that refusal to break, enraged Serafina more than any insult could have. She slapped Lyra across the face, hard. The sound echoed in the small room. Lyra's head snapped to the side. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the stone floor. But she didn't cry out. "You think you're special?" Serafina snarled. "You think building a little hut makes you worthy of an Alpha King? You're delusional." The door opened. Marcus stepped inside. He had changed clothes, wore a tailored suit, but his eyes were cold, empty. "Enough, Serafina," he said. "I need her conscious." Serafina stepped back reluctantly. Marcus approached Lyra. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice calm, reasonable, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Tonight, at the ball, I'm going to parade you in front of 5 visiting alphas. I'm going to show them that Cade Thornwood broke pack law by harboring an exile." He leaned closer. "And when they demand justice, when they question his fitness to lead, I'm going to challenge him, right there, in front of everyone." "He'll kill you," Lyra said. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. Marcus smiled. "Maybe. But I have insurance. See, when an alpha is distracted, when he's emotional, irrational, he makes mistakes. And I've been planning this for a very long time." He pulled something from his pocket, a syringe filled with clear liquid. "My grandfather used this on Cade's grandfather. My father used it on Cade's father. It's a slow-acting poison, mimics a heart attack.
By the time the fight starts, Cade will already be dying. He just won't know it yet. Lyra's blood ran cold. You murdered his father. I continued my family's work, Marcus corrected. The cross bloodline has been patient, but tonight we finish what we started 50 years ago. He gestured to Seraphina. Clean her up. Make her look less feral. She needs to be recognizable when Cade sees her. They left. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Lyra was alone in the dark. She closed her eyes, tested the chains. They were solid, iron, no give. But Omega strength wasn't about raw power. It was about endurance, about outlasting. She began to work. Cade stood in the shower. Scalding water pounded against his back. He had returned to the packhouse, forced himself to shift back to human, to dress in a tuxedo, to smile and nod at the visiting alphas who were already arriving for the ball. But inside, his wolf was clawing at his skin, demanding release, demanding blood. He had gone to the northern perimeter, found the burned remains of the sanctuary, the geothermal pipe still steaming in the ruins. Lyra's scent was everywhere, mixed with Marcus's, and the two enforcers. He knew where they had taken her, knew what Marcus was planning, and he had a plan of his own. He dried off, dressed carefully, black tuxedo, white shirt, no tie. He looked every inch the Alpha King, but his eyes, when he checked his reflection, were still faintly gold around the edges. There was a knock at his door. "Come in." Martha Reeves entered. The old cook looked terrified. "Alpha, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Marcus has been meeting with the Crimson Pack scouts," she said in a rush. "I overheard him in the kitchens last week. He's planning to invite them to attack during the ball. Create chaos. Make you look weak." Cade's jaw tightened. "Did anyone else hear this?" "Two of the young Deltas, Finn and Rebecca. They're willing to testify if you protect them." "I will," Cade promised. "Gather them. Bring them to the library in 1 hour. And Martha, thank you for your courage." She nodded and left. Cade opened his desk drawer. Inside was a stack of documents, financial records showing Marcus's embezzlement, witness statements from pack members too afraid to speak up before, and Jonathan Thornwood's diary, the one Lyra had found. He had enough to expose Marcus publicly, but there was still one piece missing, proof of the murders. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Dr. Eris, I need you to run a test. My father's blood sample, the one from his autopsy. I need you to screen for oleander toxin." A pause. "Alpha, I don't care if it's unusual. I need results in 2 hours." He hung up. In the basement, Lyra had made progress. The chains were solid, but the iron ring bolted to the wall was old, rusted. She had been working it back and forth for hours. Tiny movements, microscopic progress. Her shoulders screamed in agony. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the metal had rubbed her skin away. But she was an Omega, built for endurance, and she had survived worse than this. The ring shifted, just a fraction of an inch, but it moved. She kept going. Hours passed. The light from the small window near the ceiling changed from afternoon gray to evening gold. The ball was starting. She could hear music drifting down from above, the orchestra warming up, voices, laughter. The ring shifted again. More this time. Come on, come on. With a final, desperate pull, the ring tore free from the wall. Lyra fell to the ground in a heap, the chains still attached to her wrists, but she was free from the wall. She stood,
Her legs shook. Her vision swam. But she was standing. She looked around the room, found a piece of broken pipe in the corner, used it to pry open the lock on the chains. It took 10 minutes of fumbling with bleeding hands, but finally the lock gave. The chains fell away. She was free. Lyra moved to the door. It was locked from the outside. But this was an old building, and old buildings had weaknesses. She remembered Jonathan's diary. He had mentioned a service tunnel, a hidden passage built during Prohibition for smuggling alcohol. The entrance was behind a loose stone in the northwest corner of the basement. Lyra found it, pushed. The stone slid aside, revealing a dark tunnel that smelled of earth and time. She crawled inside. The solstice ball was in full swing. The grand ballroom of silver pine glittered like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, an orchestra playing Vivaldi. 500 guests filled the space, visiting alphas in tailored suits, their mates in designer gowns, dignitaries from neighboring packs. Cade stood on the raised platform at the head of the room. He looked calm, composed, but his eyes scanned the crowd constantly, looking for Marcus. Marcus entered through the main doors. He was smiling, confident, and behind him, dragged by 2 enforcers, was Lyra. She was bruised. Her lip was split. She wore the same dirty flannel shirt she'd been captured in. Her wrists were raw and bleeding from the chains. The music died. 500 pairs of eyes turned to stare. Marcus shoved Lyra to the center of the dance floor. She stumbled, but didn't fall. "Behold!" Marcus bellowed, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "Your alpha's dirty secret!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. "While we starved," Marcus continued, pacing around Lyra like a lawyer presenting evidence. "While our finances bled, Ethan Cade Thornwood was feeding this exile, visiting her, harboring her on pack land." He pointed at Cade. "He broke the Alpha Code. To harbor a banished wolf is a violation punishable by—" "By what, Marcus?" Cade's voice cut through the hall like a blade. He descended the grand staircase, slowly, each step deliberate. The crowd parted for him. Instinct, the pack making way for their alpha. He walked straight to Lyra, ignored Marcus completely. He stopped in front of her, looked down at her bruised face, her split lip, her bleeding wrists. And something in his chest, something that had been cold and calculating, shattered. He took off his tuxedo jacket, draped it over her shoulders with infinite gentleness. "You're right, Marcus," Cade said, turning to face the beta. "I broke the law." Marcus's smile widened. Victoria was in his grasp. "I didn't report that I found a wolf in the north," Cade continued. His voice was calm, but it carried an edge, a promise of violence. He turned to the crowd, to the visiting alphas, to his pack. "But she isn't an exile." Confusion rippled through the hall. "She is the Omega that Beta Marcus Cross sentenced to death without trial, without evidence. She is the woman who survived a blizzard that would have killed most alphas. She is the healer who saved my life when I was dying." He paused, let that sink in. "And she is under my protection." "Protection?" Seraphina's shrill voice cut through the murmurs. She stepped forward from the crowd. "She's a servant, a nobody. You can't—" "I can do whatever I want," Cade said softly. "I'm the Alpha." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket, opened it. Pages cascaded to the floor. Financial records, bank statements,
Transaction histories. Marcus Cross has embezzled $2.3 million from PAC funds over the last 5 years, Cade announced. He's been skimming profits from our casino, our lumber mill, our investments. Marcus's face went pale. That's a lie. I have the second set of books you kept hidden in your office safe, Cade said. He looked at the visiting alphas. The combination was your grandfather's birthday. Sloppy, Marcus. One of the alphas, an older man from Red River PAC, stepped forward. These are serious accusations, Thornwood. Do you have proof? I do. Cade gestured to Martha, who stepped forward with a box of documents. Witness statements from PAC members Marcus threatened into silence. Financial records showing the discrepancies. And this. He held up Jonathan's diary. My grandfather's journal, detailing how Marcus's grandfather orchestrated his exile and the murder of his Omega mate 50 years ago. Marcus lunged forward. You have no proof of oleander poisoning. Dr. Aris stepped out of the crowd. The PAC physician was elderly, respected, beyond reproach. I ran the test you requested, Alpha, Dr. Aris said, his voice shaking slightly. Your father's preserved blood sample tested positive for oleander toxin. Trace amounts, but enough to cause cardiac arrest in a healthy male. The hall erupted. Visiting alphas backed away from Marcus. PAC members gasped. Serafina's face went white. Your father, Cade said, advancing on Marcus, poisoned my father. Just like your grandfather poisoned mine. The Cross bloodline has been murdering Thornwoods for 2 generations. Marcus's composure cracked. His eyes went wild. Your family took everything from us, he roared. Your grandfather cast mine out for daring to challenge him. My father died in exile. You deserved nothing, Cade said. His voice dropped to a growl. And you will get exactly what you gave Lyra. He didn't shift, didn't need to. He grabbed Marcus by the throat with one hand, lifted him off the ground. Marcus clawed at Cade's arm. His face turned purple. Cade, Lyra's voice, quiet, but it cut through the chaos. Cade turned. She was standing, the tuxedo jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Don't kill him here, she said. Her voice was steady despite the pain she was in. He deserves public justice, not a quick death. Cade held Marcus for a moment longer, then dropped him. Marcus collapsed to the floor, gasping. You're right, Cade said. He turned to the visiting alphas, to the assembled PAC. Marcus Cross, I sentence you to the northern perimeter. No shelter, no supplies, no aid. You will have exactly what you gave this woman, nothing. You'll survive on your wits, or you won't survive at all. He looked at the enforcers. Take him. Guards moved forward, grabbed Marcus. Wait, Serafina cried. She fell to her knees. Please, Alpha, I only did what Marcus told me to. I was scared? Lyra asked. She walked forward. Every step was agony, but she held her head high. Or ambitious? Serafina looked up at her. Tears streamed down her perfect makeup. You burned my home, Lyra said quietly. You tortured me. You tried to break me. She paused. But here's the difference between us, Serafina. I survived the worst you could do, and I'm still standing. She looked at Cade. I don't want her exiled. I want her to learn. Cade raised an eyebrow. What do you suggest? Demotion, Lyra said. To Omega. She'll work in the kitchens, under Martha's supervision. She'll learn humility, or she'll leave on her own. Seraphina's face contorted. Being demoted to Omega was, in her mind, worse than exile. But Cade nodded. So ordered. Guards dragged both Marcus and Seraphina away. Their screams echoed through the hall. Cade turned to Lyra. The ballroom was silent, watching. He knelt before her.
The Alpha King of Silverpine, in his custom tuxedo, kneeling before an Omega in rags. "Lyra Ashford," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You survived what would kill most wolves. You built hope from ruins. You saved my life. You uncovered a conspiracy spanning generations." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, silver, set with moonstones that caught the light. "Will you stand beside me, not as my subject, but as my equal, as my Luna?" Lyra looked down at him, at this powerful man kneeling before her. Tears finally came, but they were tears of relief, of joy. "Yes," she whispered. The hall erupted in applause, but Cade didn't stand. Not yet. "I need you to know something," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was blind. I let vipers nest in my house, while the strongest among us suffered. That ends tonight." He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, passionate, a claiming, a promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the applause had turned to cheers. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd. She carried a silver crown on a velvet cushion. The Luna crown. It hadn't been worn since Cade's mother died 20 years ago. Cade took it, placed it on Lyra's head. "She is my Luna," he announced. "She is your compassion, your strength. You will treat her as you would treat me." One by one, the pack began to kneel. Martha first, then the young Deltas, then the older wolves. Even the visiting Alphas bowed their heads in respect. The entire ballroom knelt before the Omega who had tamed the winter. Lyra stood there, crowned and trembling, and felt something she had never felt before. She belonged. 6 months later. Spring had come to Wyoming. The snow had melted. Wildflowers bloomed in meadows that had been frozen wastelands. Lyra stood at the northern perimeter, at the place where the old trapper's hut had been. It had been rebuilt, not as a ruin, but as a proper structure. Heated, insulated, stocked with supplies. A sign above the door read, "Ashford, Northern Station." It had saved 15 lives during the spring storms. Border Patrol guards who got caught in unexpected weather. Lost hikers. Even a pregnant Delta who went into labor during a freak snowstorm. Lyra ran a hand over the sign, smiled. "Admiring your handiwork?" She turned. Cade stood behind her, leaning against a tree. He looked relaxed, happy. "It's not just mine," Lyra said. She was visibly pregnant now. 7 months, her belly round and pronounced. "You helped rebuild it." "I hammered some nails," Cade said, walking over to her. "You designed the whole system, the geothermal expansion, the emergency protocols. This was all you." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his hands on her belly. The baby kicked. They both smiled. "Pack meeting went well?" Lyra asked. "Better than well," Cade said. "The new Omega Rights Charter passed unanimously. Equal food rations, heated quarters, access to education and training, no more servant class. What about Serafina? Still in the kitchens. Martha says she's actually learning. Might even become a decent person eventually. Lyra leaned back against him. And Marcus? Cade's jaw tightened. He lasted 3 weeks in the north. Tried to return. The border guards turned him away. He's living as a rogue now, somewhere south, alone. Good, Lyra said simply. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the mountains. Do you ever regret it? Lyra asked quietly. Choosing me over tradition? Cade turned her around, cupped her face in his hands. Every choice has a cost, he said. But you? He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. You're the only choice that ever made sense. The baby kicked again, harder this time. They both laughed. Come on, Cade said, taking her hand. Martha's making dinner. And she said if we're late, she's feeding it to the wolves. We are wolves, Lyra pointed out. Exactly. They walked back toward the pack house. The lights were warm in the windows. Smoke curled from the chimneys. Through the windows, Lyra could see pack members setting the table, laughing, talking. Not servants and masters. Family. She touched the crown she still wore. Silver and moonstones, a symbol of a promise kept. They thought the winter would kill her. They were wrong. She didn't just survive the cold. She became the warmth they couldn't ignore. And in the end, the Omega they rejected became the Luna they needed. The one who reminded them all that strength isn't always measured in power. Sometimes it's measured in the ability to build hope from ruins, to turn a grave into a sanctuary, to survive the winter and bloom in spring. Lyra smiled as Cade squeezed her hand. She was home. Finally, truly home. And the winter, that brutal, beautiful winter that had tried to break her, had instead forged her into something unbreakable. A Luna, a queen, a wolf made in the winter.